Good.
I just know it.
I'm going to Hawaii. So excited, yeah. I know we've been on some big trips this year.
I went right before COVID. I'm so glad that I went with like my family and stuff, but I'm like, I can't go more now. It's like things are getting.
I know, more and more normal, right?
I didn't go to Hawaii too. I went like the summer of 19.
Did everybody have a good weekend?
Yeah.
Today's my little ones are 9 today. Like my babies. Like, don't say that. No, right? I know. The weekend and we went to a funeral for my partner's grandparents and like just no. Like, I'm like, I don't have a birth certificate, like, on me. He like wouldn't let my daughter order from the kids menu because she looks so big. She's taller than her. And I'm like, but she's 10, her birthday's in July. Like, fine, then I'll order from the kids menu for her. Ridiculous. Like, my kids are like, they're getting so big. I know, like, I don't know, it didn't make any sense to me. Was that did you put a? I know, right? Sometimes the kids menu has good stuff on it. When we were on our cruise, like they have brownies on their, but not on the adult menu. And our waitress every night would start bringing the brownies from the kids menu for me. Like, that's perfect. I'll take it. So, and I get 2 cakes tonight. I'm very much looking forward to. Yeah, one's chocolate, one's vanilla. Or white. White is white. What was that? Oh, my twins. It's their 9th. Double cakes. Today and Wednesday, then we have Monday, and then Wednesday next week is our final exam, which is exam number 3, which will be on Canvas. So we are very much down to our last couple of chapters at this point. So I just wanted to kind of put this up here. So obviously we've fallen a little bit behind. So chapter 16 is kind of a lighter chapter. So I posted a lecture video of it on Canvas. It's in the PowerPoint slides. I don't know if any of you saw it. Some of you are nodding. So make sure you look over chapter 16 a little bit more on your own. But I did post a video. It's about 30-40 minutes, and it's me lecturing to the slides. It was from during COVID when I had to do everything online, but I've saved it, and so I posted it there if you'd like to watch that. What we'll do today is we'll cover 17 or most of. We might have a little bit left. So I have an activity at the end of it that we'll probably do at the beginning of next time. And then Wednesday, we'll start chapter 18, which is our very last chapter on sex for sale. So prostitution, pornography, all of those fun things. That's what we'll talk about. My mom is going to be here visiting on Wednesday. I was like, I hope you're ready for prostitution, because that's what we're talking about, like pornography and prostitution. She's like, can I come to class with you? It's like, I guess, if you don't mind listening about like sex and prostitution. So that'll be interesting.
She's only coming to this one?
She's coming to both.
Oh,
right. So yeah, she's got a lot of medical issues, so I hope she doesn't. We'll see. But that's our plan. So make sure you look. Let's do about it on the. Remember, the exam's online. You have all your notes, you have your book. And then the exam on Wednesday next week, we won't have class, just like every other test, it'll be on Canvas. And it's just a 3rd exam. It's not cumulative in any way. So it'll just be on everything since the last test. The one thing I forgot to write up here, there is a brief closing assignment. Let me write that up here. So let me see if I can get onto Canvas really quick so I can show you that, since we have a minute today. So again, those are the things that are coming up. Let me just put this on here. Sorry, a couple clicks and I'll be there. So for the closing assignment, what you're doing is you are reflecting back over the topics we've covered over the semester. So rather than giving you a cumulative final, our final is just a 3rd exam. but this part will kind of give us a cumulative element, but you get to do it ahead of time, and you'll write it as a short paper, right? So with this, what you're doing, if you're on our page here, if you go to assignments, or you can go to modules, either one, you will find it on here. Let me go down, closing assignment right here under homework assignment 1 and 2. And this will be due by the end of the day where we have the exam. So everything is due by Wednesday, the 10th. And then what will happen is during finals week, I will be here during our normal time, during our scheduled final time. If you want to come meet with me or ask any questions or find out your final grade, which will be on Canvas, but you can come meet with me. But for the closing assignment, this is worth 25 points. And what you're doing is you're thinking back about 5 things that you can take away from this class and apply to your life. I hope you have more than 5, but hopefully there are at least 5. Maybe when we were talking about birth control methods, there was something in there that stood out to you that is helpful, or that STI handshake that we had last time that I had way too much fun talking about all weekend, was maybe something that stood out to you as to why you should use protection or have a conversation. So what you'll do is you'll pick 5 specific concepts from the class. And for each one of them, you're going to follow this very kind of specific format. You're going to give me the term or concept, you'll define it, and then you'll give me like a paragraph saying how you could apply it to your life. And this is something that you're going to type out and you're going to turn in here on Canvas. And I'll remind you of it, in the coming classes, but it's not necessarily like a standard paper. You're following this format. You don't need transitions. It's 5 separate concepts. Each one is worth 5 points. It should probably be about 2 pages in total, and you're going to be turning it in here on Canvas under these instruction links. So I have a sample one, I thought, or maybe I didn't put it on here, but again, you're just following this format. Give me a term, definition, and then how you could apply it. And I really hope, as I said, there's at least 5 things, but you only need to pick 5. And that gets you all thinking back over the semester to reflect on things we've covered. And it can be anything that we've covered or have yet to cover. Okay. 1 or 2 people have actually turned it in already, which is fantastic, but this is due on the same day as the exam. So you have like another week and a couple of days. This is also a really good point. If you haven't done it already, be checking your grades on Canvas. If something is missing or something looks wrong, let me know. It's really easy to fix that now. Once the semester ends, we have to like fill out paperwork and have signatures if something was wrong. But if you notice you're missing something or something looks wrong, let me know so we can fix it. If you never turned in the homework assignments, you can still turn them in for half credit, right? So just kind of look at your grade and let me know if you have any questions or if anything looks wrong. This is in the next week, a good time to be doing it. Okay? Any questions about the schedule, the final, anything that we have coming up? Summer's coming. I mean, you can't tell today, but it's coming, right? Definitely not very summery weather today, but I love it. I love it. All right, so then we will go back here. So we're starting with 17 today, and this isn't the easiest of chapters, right? It's not the lightest of chapters by far. We're looking at power and sexual coercion. I imagine a lot of you in this room have known somebody who's been a victim of one of these things. So we'll go over, what they are and some characteristics and so on. We'll talk a lot about consent today and what that means and what that looks like. But I know this can be a little bit of a harder topic. I definitely have people in my life who have been victims of some of these things. So just something that we'll keep in mind as we go through. But when we're talking about sexual coercion and sexual violence, we're talking about incidences where someone has been deprived of their free choice in some way, or maybe they're coerced or forced to comply with something under threats or under stress. There can be a whole variety of situations where this happens, but we're talking about you losing your ability to consent or losing your free will or your choice. And this can be sexual harassment, which we'll talk about. It can be intimate partner violence. It could be rape. It could be incest. There's a lot of different elements to this chapter. And again, something that I think can be maybe triggering for some of us. So keep that in mind. But sexual violence is any kind of sexual act committed against somebody without their consent. And that's really what we'll talk a lot about today. What is consent? What does that look like? What are the barriers to consent? Because this whole chapter is about your consent being violated, okay? Not giving your consent and something happening anyway. So the first one that we'll talk about, sexual assault or rape, right, would be any kind of either completed or attempted, unwanted, vaginal, oral, or anal penetration through the use of physical force, threats of violence, or maybe when somebody is under the influence of alcohol or drugs. And we'll talk about how that can impact consent here in a moment. But 4 different types of rape that the book talks about and that we sometimes divide up into. They're very rarely this like neatly organized, but just to present them this way. Stranger, acquaintance, date, and statutory are the 4 different types. And by far, the most common is the second one, right? We tend to think that rape is something that is perpetrated by someone you don't know. The most common incident is somebody who is an acquaintance of yours, somebody that you know, right? And sad as that is, right? So stranger would obviously be somebody that is unknown to you. That definitely happens, but it's not the most common. Acquaintance could be a friend or somebody that you know like minimally, someone that is known to the victim. Date rape would be somebody that you're on a date with or in a relationship with, which happens as well. And then statutory would be somebody who's under the age of consent. Now that age varies from state to state. Typically we say 18. Okay, that's kind of like the universal rule, but it varies from state to state, country to country. Every country and state has its own rules about what is legal and when. When we were in Belize, they let my 8-year-olds take a shot of alcohol. They're like, do your kids want some alcohol? I was like, no, they do not. They're 8. They tried it anyway, but and they said it was disgusting, so that's good. But every country, every state has different rules about like what is considered legal and illegal when. In the United States, generally, we say the age of consent is 18. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about consent. Sorry, hitting buttons here. Our presenter that came in last week, Jasmine, I took a couple of these from her. I'm going to pass them. I'll start one at each end. They talk a little bit about consent and boundaries and conversations around sex. So if you want to just look at them. But consent is when, I have up here, kind of a general definition, a conscious mind and body alignment of both partners, both parties agreeing to have sex, both parties having willingness or excitement to engage in any kind of intimacy or sexual behavior. Now, consent is a really tricky one, right? This should be something that you have a conversation with somebody about before engaging in like any kind of intimate behavior. But there are definitely barriers to consent. Anyone know, I've already given you one of them, but what are some things that might get in the way of somebody being able to consent or give their agreement to have like intimacy? Yeah, I'll go back to number 2. Alcohol, for sure. But if somebody is under the influence of alcohol, it is a barrier to consent. Was that yours?
That was mine, but also age, I guess, like,
Yep.
Mental capacity.
Yep, age and mental capacity, which can be different things, right? So somebody has to be 18 or older, or have the mental capacity to agree, which could be influenced by alcohol or drugs, or it could be influenced by a developmental delay of some sort. Anything else you could think of? There are a couple more, yeah. State of mind. Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of goes with the mental capacity, but their state of mind would matter, right? Obviously, if somebody is not alert, awake, and conscious, that is a huge barrier to consent. So whether that's due to alcohol or drugs or something else, if they're not awake and alert and conscious, being forced or threatened. So any kind of use of intimidation or fear would be another barrier to consent. Really important to have consent when you're engaging in any kind of like sexual activity. And this can be verbal or nonverbal or both. And I have a video and it's a little bit cringy. Like I will share that right off the bat, right? But I think it's helpful, right? So this person does a lot of like YouTube videos related to like sexuality and psychology. And she goes through some like nonverbal and verbal signs of what consent could look like or not look like. Not the most comfortable thing always to watch, but I do think that it's helpful anyway. So I'm going to play it for you. And it's talking about this idea of giving consent and what that can or can't look like at times. So let me play this. You're going to see and notice those things, right? And so, looking at consent is both a verbal and a nonverbal behavior. And then remembering that there are also lots of barriers to consent that might make it impossible for somebody to give that, right? And she talks about consent culture. That's a big push, right now, making sure that we are in that realm instead of, just pushing somebody until they have to give in. Yeah.
First, I think that video is a poor memory.
Uh-huh.
Second, she didn't really answer the question about the two drunk people thing.
Mhm.
So she did say that it's an action, that at least one person has to actively be taking action. But technically, drunk people can sort of take action of some sort.
For sure.
So if they're both taking action
Mhm.
of some kind, but it's illegal to have sex with a drunk person, they're both drunk, are they both gonna go to jail?
No. So like the idea, a lot of people drink, right? And drink and engage in sexuality. Drinking does decrease your inhibitions a little bit and like decrease your judgment, right? And a lot of people will drink as part of like sexual activities, right? And it's not that it's illegal to drink and have sex, right? Be a lot of people in trouble if that were the case, but it's the idea of like, you can't give consent. So if you have somebody, like two people who've maybe never had sex before, they're at a party and they meet and they're both really drunk, it starts to get a little more blurry, right? If they're both really into it, right, then it's not as much of a problem. But if one person is a little more hesitant or so inebriated that they can't even actively participate, that's when it starts to get messy. So it's not necessarily that it's illegal. It's just a barrier to being able to be in your right mind to give that consent, if that makes sense. Yeah. If it were illegal to be drunk and have sex, a lot of people would be in trouble, right? But it's just, it could be a barrier to your ability to consent.
I swear.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's where it's really important, again, to be paying attention to all those cues in the environment. And ideally having a conversation. If you haven't seen this, like put this together, it's important to have conversations before sex, whether it's about STDs or STIs or, protection of what you're going to do to avoid pregnancy or STDs or whatever it might be, or if both people are consenting. As uncomfortable as those conversations can be, they are important for a lot of reasons. All right. Oops. There we go. Prevalence. So difficult to get accurate statistics about how often rape occurs. These stats are like 8 years old at this point. Statistics are always a little behind. There's probably newer numbers I could find for you, but there are quite a few cases of rape every year. And it's a little bit like staggering when you look at it, right? So it's very prevalent, unfortunately, right? And what we see is that it can be really difficult to get accurate statistics because people don't always report it. What's a reason that somebody might not report a rape? Yeah.
Because their like abuser would like do again to them. And,
Yeah.
like don't want like a lot of attention put on them about it.
Yeah. Both of those things could be true. Yeah.
Get like fired.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Well, you tell anyone, I will fire you. You'll lose your job. Yeah.
Because they don't want to be put through a trial or embarrassed.
Yeah.
To relive all that trauma.
Right. It can be really traumatic to go through all of that. I'm not sure. I think you had to get a percent. Yeah. No one will believe you, or they'll think it's your fault. Right. Maybe, oh, did I still use? I'm so sorry. Right. That maybe you did something to solicit it in some. Yeah.
It's so like, important in your life and you don't want to
Yeah.
face repercussions with that.
Yeah. Right. For sure. Anyone else? Did they steal yours?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That all of their friends and family might take the other person's side, that they have
Sure.
that the other person's social influence around their life,
Totally possible.
or that someone might sue for defamation.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. People could easily like have that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's awful that the consequences for rape and sexual assault aren't nearly as severe as they really should be, right? That people won't believe you, that you have to go through the trauma. Like if you report, being sexually assaulted, you have to go to the police station. They have to collect data and evidence, right? It's more trauma on top of the trauma you've already experienced, and all the reasons all of you mentioned and then some. It's very difficult to get a good indication of how often this happens, but sadly, it happens pretty commonly, right? It's a staggering statistic. It's like 1 in 4 women will be raped at some point in their life, right? And that's a very hard number to accept, right? Especially as a parent of 3 girls, like that's scary to me, right? But it's something that, again, I'm sure a lot of you know people who have been a victim of sexual assault in some capacity. The media plays a big role in this too, especially the stereotypes that are pervaded in pornography, which we'll talk more about like in the following classes. But oftentimes there's this like, you know, somebody says no, and you just have to push a little bit harder, and that's acceptable and okay. When in reality, you know, no should mean no, right? But the media definitely plays a big role in kind of glamorizing that pushing or that lack of consent, that not being as prevalent as it should be. Some characteristics of rapists, rape perpetrators, typically tends to be someone who's male, right? Stereotypically, not always, but most commonly someone who is male. And most commonly, this is about domination and control more than actually being about sex. Right. And that isn't always the case, but it's more typically about power, domination, and control than anything else. Most commonly, the people who are victims of rape are young women between the ages of 16 and 24. And it's typically someone that is known to you. Now, men can obviously be raped as well, right? Even less reported. Right? Men don't tend to report rape nearly as commonly because of some of the stereotypes of masculinity, right? But it can definitely occur as well. It's not the norm, but it's definitely something that does happen. So again, a big thing, it tends to be more about power and control than anything else. Date rape drugs are often very commonly a part of rape situations, unfortunately, right? And so there's a lot of things you should be careful of to protect yourself, like never accepting a drink from somebody you don't know. If you're at a big party or in a bar, like keeping your hand or covering a drink. Things like Rohypnol, GHB, ketamine, hydrochloride, alcohol. There's a lot of like substances that tend to be involved in kind of depriving someone of their consent. Rohypnol, or roofies as it's commonly known, challenge you not to think of The Hangover. That's all I can ever think of with that. But this drug is very similar to Valium. It causes an incredibly powerful sedative element to it. And it also tends to lead to short-term memory loss. And so it can be a very dangerous drug. If somebody slips it into a drink, it's odorless. You can't see it, you can't taste it. And you oftentimes will kind of become very drowsy. And that's when somebody might come in and take advantage of you. Yeah.
So, because like this one, obviously it happens common, especially with like roofing and stuff that
Yeah.
like, pretty common where people will use that. But my question is like, how do people even get that?
Yeah. I mean, you purchase it like as a street drug, like unfortunately, like you could go purchase it from somebody who sells drugs, just like you could purchase other substances as well.
Oh.
Sadly, there is a whole market for it. I mean, and it could just be even just alcohol. People drink, and like we all have different susceptibilities to how much we can drink and still be lucid and okay. But things like Rohypnol, very, very commonly used. And interestingly, there's a new wave. This has been around for maybe about 5 to 10 years now, but they have developed some really cool nail polishes that you can put on that will detect these substances. And some of them are clear. So, you know, like if you're like, oh, I don't want to wear a pink nail polish, right, or whatever, you put them on and they're clear, and you can dip your finger in the drink. If there's something in it, they'll turn color.
Oh,
Really cool. And so like people who are at parties or like big social events, you can buy these online. Undercovercolors.com was one that I found, but you can find them probably anywhere. But you put it on your nail, and then you can put your finger in the drink. It changes color if there's a substance in there. So there's some really cool like things to help with that. But you know, you can also just try to be safe, like be at parties with other people, cover your drinks, don't accept them from people you don't know. And things like that will also be a little bit, keep you a little safer. Yeah.
I've also heard of like straws.
Yeah. Straws, nail polish, right here. There's a few, which are really neat to think that you can detect them. So sad. Yeah, it's sad that we have to have a market for detecting the drugs, but it's amazing that we have things that will detect them. Sorry, double-edged sword. Okay. In terms of the aftermath of rape, if somebody has been sexually assaulted, it's not uncommon for them to develop like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We sometimes talk about it a little bit differently, and we call it rape trauma syndrome, but it falls under the realm of like post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So if somebody experiences a trauma of any kind, it's not uncommon for it to affect them for long after that event, right? Which would be typical of PTSD. But with RTS or rape trauma syndrome, what we see is that people tend to follow kind of like a 2-stage pattern. when they've been deprived of their ability to consent, right, and had any kind of sexual assault. They go through an acute phase right after the event, and then they oftentimes go through a long-term phase as well. Right. In the acute phase, they might have things like shock or fear or anger, like very immediate reactions to the things that happen to them. Right. Long-term stuff might be affecting your comfort with sexuality. If you have a partner that has been deprived of their consent and has been a victim of sexual assault, they might struggle with intimacy for a very long time. Right. That's not uncommon. Right, you might have to be a little more careful with consent. You might have to have boundaries and conversations. Again, those conversations are important, right? But it's very common for people to have like a long-term effect of things, and it might relate to like feeling out of control, right? And so there are a lot of interesting correlates with this. But you might also see like what's called traumatic sexualization when children are deprived of their consent. We'll talk more about incest and pedophilia in a moment. You might see some inappropriate sexual behavior in children, which is usually a huge red flag. Okay, as a therapist, you're trained to look for any kind of like atypical sexual behavior in children. So like if you're having them play with toys and the toys are being overly sexual, that's usually an indication that something is inappropriate in their environment. Right, it could be that they watch something inappropriate, or it could be more. But you often see a lot of like inappropriate sexual behavior in children who have either been exposed to some of this or maybe victims of some of this at a young age. Yeah.
So this is a little bit of a story, but it has to do with this
Okay.
because it was very, very shocking to me. My sister went to outdoor ed recently, and she came back and she told my mom that apparently she heard one of the 5th grade boys try to sexually assault another one of the 5th grade boys. So immediately I'm like, oh my God, like we need to police, right? Like this kid is probably experiencing that, right? Like he's probably over sexualized because he's been, so turns out that it was a rumor that 2 kids started. They lied about another boy doing. And my question is, do you think that has anything to do with that? With being exposed to like.
It could. It's so hard because, I mean, with the effect of like, I don't know, like my kids, for example, at 8 and 9, or 9 now. I said 8, they're 9 now, right? They're technically not 9 until 4 o'clock, right? I'm holding on to that. But at that, I mean, they watch an incredible amount of YouTube. Right. And like we try to monitor it, but I mean, just the stuff that they watch and say like from it, we're like, where did you hear that? Right. Like, yeah, right.
So like, I don't know.
Yeah. And it could be, oftentimes when children have older siblings, you see some of that more prevalently when they have older siblings that are more like sexually active or just at a different stage of life where they're talking about things that aren't appropriate for those younger ones. It could be that they were exposed to something that like it's in their environment and that's why they're aware of it. Yeah. And oftentimes when that stuff is reported, it wouldn't be uncommon to have a counselor or like social worker follow up with the family to see where that's coming from. So, I mean, hopefully something like that happens. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's uncomfortable, right? Really, sexual behavior in young children is abnormal. Right. Children will engage in like curiosity, like sex play, like Dr. House kind of stuff. Like that's not abnormal, but like super sexualized like comments or things like that are a little bit of a red flag oftentimes. And so it wouldn't surprise me to have it be like looked at a little bit deeper.
I felt like.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that a hint?
Yeah. Even like at my job, like I've seen like kids that like do that kind of stuff. Or like another time, like these 2 kids like went and like tried to sneak off and like went like near like the like bushes and were like sitting on top of each other, like literally like reenact like doing like that act basically, but they had clothes on. And it's so like they're like in 3rd and 4th grade, and it's like, how do you even like know? Like it's just insane. Like it's sad. And it's such a range, right? Like I mean, there are 3rd, 4th, 5th graders who have no knowledge of anything sexual, and then there are ones who have way too much knowledge, right? And so it's such a spectrum, but too much of that is usually a little concerning. Yeah.
I mean, this is a little information.
Sure.
When I was 6, I didn't, but they knew, it kind of reminds me of what you're saying was they knew because I used to say everything was hiccup.
Yeah. Yeah, and like oftentimes at that age, you don't know what that behavior is, right? And if it's somebody like a parent or a family member, like you might think it's just like they're showing like special love to you in some way. You don't know what that means necessarily, right? And this can happen between like parents and children, cousins, right? Uncles and aunts, right? Like this is sadly, like this kind of stuff can happen within families too, which we'll get to a little more in a minute. Right. And thank you for sharing. And I'm sure that isn't easy. And a lot of you probably have stories that are hard with this, right? I definitely have a few people I'm very close to in my life who have been victims of this, right? And it still affects them years and years later. Really important to be supportive of a friend or a family member or somebody. If somebody does report this, believe them, don't blame them, right? And be there for them. What can I do to help you? Can I go with you? Right? Like just trying to be supportive. And not like, give any feelings of shame or embarrassment related to this, because a lot of people feel deeply shamed and embarrassed by these things, right? Because it was so out of their control. So just trying to be supportive and believing and kind and empathetic can go a very long way. So we've kind of been talking about this a little bit too, but obviously we can have child sexual abuse more specifically, right? And so child sexual abuse is any kind of sexual contact with a child, which could be touching, or it could be actual sex, coitus, which we would call any kind of stimulation. Pedophilia is any kind of sexual contact between an adult and a child who are not related, right? So this would be someone who is an adult and someone who is a child, but no connection, versus incest would be two people who are related, right? So a parent, an uncle, a sibling, for example, versus someone you don't know. Right. And there really isn't a classic profile for someone who's a pedophile. It is most commonly someone who's male, most commonly someone who's heterosexual, which is an interesting stereotype. We tend to think that this is someone who might be like gay, but it's typically a heterosexual male, but not always. Very, very commonly goes unreported. Right. Again, children might not know what's happening to them. They might not want to get a parent in trouble or somebody in trouble. They might tell the other parent who doesn't believe them. Right. So this is very, very commonly unreported, and it can be very traumatizing. Obviously, this can have long-term consequences for somebody, leading to things like complex post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, developmental trauma. It can lead to a lot of long-term issues. But we're typically in this realm, again, we're talking about someone who is under the age of 18. And it gets complicated because technically you could have someone who's 18 and someone who's 16, and that could be considered like statutory, like rape. Not very common is that pursued, but when you have like she said in the video, when you have two people who are in very different areas of life, different ages, it tends to be a red flag. Yeah.
What about if there was like child sexual abuse, but between two children?
Yeah.
One child that was a little bit older.
Yeah.
Then what would that be called?
Typically like statutory rape is what it would often be called. So maybe you have someone who's like the older sibling and a younger sibling. And if they have enough of an age range, like that could be considered incest or like statutory incest or statutory rape.
Okay.
And that happens too, or maybe you have a sibling or a cousin who, isn't that much older, maybe a year or two older, but you have one who's under the age of consent and one who isn't. Yeah.
If a child who's like 1 year younger or something forces themselves on someone who's like same age or like even a year older.
Yeah, when two people are of the same age, like it's usually, it's still in that statutory like realm because you're both underage. If it's consensual, like no one's gonna do anything about it. But if you're forcing on somebody, it's different. And yeah, then you could file charges of statutory rape, someone who's like 15 and someone who's 16, right? Or 15 and 14, like it could be filed. Yeah, it could be, right? You still have two people underage, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does happen like at a young age that would be considered, child sexual abuse or like statutory rape, some kind. Again, when you're under the age of 18, we're in like that statutory realm. Sexual harassment, maybe a little less intense, but still something that can make life very uncomfortable for people. I imagine a lot of you, anyone who's worked in like a service industry as a waiter, a waitress, customer service, some of you are just like deep side. I spent a lot of years working in like retail and food, like before when I was in college and before I became like a professor or a counselor, there's a lot of sexual harassment. And like the interesting thing is even trainings on this, like people kind of roll their eyes like, oh, it's not important. It's really important to talk about this. Sexual harassment is when you have unwanted sexual advances, requests for favors or other physical, verbal conduct of a sexual nature in the workplace or even an academic setting, right? And so there are really kind of two main types of this. One's called quid pro quo and the other hostile environment. And the essence of both of these is that your work or academic environment is made uncomfortable by somebody's sexual behavior or sexual advances. So quid pro quo is like, if you do this, I will do this back, right? If you perform sexual behaviors for me, I will give you a promotion. If you do this, I will give you an A in the class, right? Like, sadly, this happens in academic settings as well. Hostile environment is more like inappropriate behavior in the workplace or in a school environment that is intolerable for a person who is like being exposed to it. And I think the tricky thing with sexual harassment is everybody has a different line of what's okay for them, right? Like, I am incredibly hard to offend. Like, it takes a lot to offend me, especially when it relates to like sexual jokes and things. I find them funny, like it doesn't offend me, right? But then other people, maybe it offends them very easily. When I was 18, I worked at Yosemite National Park for the summer. I did it a few summers. It was amazing. I loved it. And I flipped burgers in like a hamburger stand in what used to be called Curry Village, right? And I flipped hamburgers all summer. My boss was like the biggest pervert in the world. And I found it hilarious. Like, it didn't bother me. I found it funny, right? Like, huge, heavy, overweight, middle-aged white guy, balding, just to give you a picture. And he would spend the whole day like joking about like, why don't you get in there between the buns and the hamburger? And I'd be like, that's impractical. You know, like I would just joke. I'd be like, why ruin a good hamburger? You know, like, it didn't offend me in the slightest. But he would make inappropriate comments all day about stuff like that. And I would laugh. I didn't care, right? And we had this like weird, like passive aggressive, like sexualized culture that like everyone was fine with. And then they hired this new person and she came in, he made a joke to her, she reported him and he was fired, right? It offended her deeply and she had every right to be offended. It was so inappropriate. It didn't bother me. And I had every faith that if I told this guy to stop, he would stop. And like, but I didn't care. Like, it didn't offend me. And like, he had zero chance in any way of me getting in between a hamburger and like a bun or whatever. Like, it wasn't happening. And so I didn't care, but for her, it made her really uncomfortable. She reported him and he was gone very, very quickly. And I think that's what makes this so tricky is everybody has their own space and their own line. Some people are fine with like inappropriate comments. Some people are fine with being touched or being called like, you know, pet names or nicknames. Other people, it makes them deeply uncomfortable. And so I think that's why you have to be so careful because you just never know where somebody's line is, right? And I wish she had asked him to stop because I know he would have stopped, but she had every right at the same time to be offended and uncomfortable by his comments. And so that's where it becomes tricky. And again, I imagine a lot of you have been victims of sexual harassment. I see it so often, like when we're out to eat at restaurants, people flirting inappropriately or making inappropriate comments to waiters and waitresses. It's so common. It's sad. Yeah.
I was literally like catcalled
Yeah.
just this weekend when I was walking from the car to the store
Uh-huh.
and I was with my boyfriend.
Uh-huh.
And still somebody in their car like rolled down the window and whistled and they're like, want to go get something to eat with me? And I was like, ew, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Response to that.
Right. Like, no, thank you. Right. No, I'm good. Right. Are you bringing my boyfriend too? Like, I mean, even just walking, doing nothing in so many ways. Yeah.
So my mom back in like the 80s and 90s, when she just graduated high school, she worked at Outback. And the mandatory uniform for the female employees was like really short shorts or really short skirt. And she had this like old man like totally harassing her. And she went up to her manager and she's like, I'm wearing pants the next time I come in. He's like, well, that's against the dress code or whatever. Yeah. And she was like, I don't care. You can fire me. I will like put you on blast. I'll tell everyone I know that you're like a horrible person. Just let us wear pants. And then they changed the game for that.
Good. Right.
To not tolerate like any
It's good, and you shouldn't have to, right? But it's very common in like the food service industry. Because you're taught, right, the customer is right, you cater to the customer, but at what point do you have rights too, right? Like, and so it becomes really blurry that way. Go here.
Yeah, I worked at a pizza place, and like, I was so busted, but I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
For workers and working in front of the cash register, like, so many guys
Yeah.
harassing, like, trying to get something.
Mhm.
And I think one of the worst things is that one of our coworkers was constantly harassing the cashiers.
Yeah.
And eventually got fired for commenting as well.
And usually when it's between coworkers, there's more like grounds and repercussions that are present. Like it tends to be followed up on more than when it's between a customer and like an employee, because like we have this blurry like sense of customer service that sometimes gets in the way. But it's not appropriate whether it's between coworkers or a customer and an employee. It can make things very uncomfortable for someone, and you shouldn't have to be uncomfortable in your work or like academic environment because of somebody else's behavior. Yeah. Yeah.
And it gets hard because I worked at a place about, I would just chop it up.
Mhm.
I worked at that place and the owner, there's no corporation,
Yeah.
like he owns it himself and it's only his role. There's two owners. One of them is amazing. I love when he knows my family. The other one, he likes to grab butts.
Yeah.
And he grabbed mine and because he doesn't listen, like you tell him no, he will just laugh.
Yeah.
Like he's like, it's like, oh, but, and then he grabbed my butt and I slapped him.
Mhm.
And then I got fired right there. But like, I didn't report or anything, like did get fired.
Mhm.
But I told him multiple times.
Yeah.
It's under this girl that worked there.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're younger or when there's a power dynamic, you might not feel like you have any say. I mean, technically, the fact that you were fired from that, you could press charges, right? Yeah. Right. Right. And that's not an uncommon, like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Like, they're my boss. It's like, what do I don't want to lose my job. But you shouldn't have to be uncomfortable either, right? Was there another thought I just saw in my hand? I dream them sometimes, right? But I mean, in an ideal world, you shouldn't ever have to be uncomfortable. I think, if somebody is doing things that make you uncomfortable, the first step is to try and tell them. If you feel comfortable doing so, say, hey, when you say that, it makes me uncomfortable. Hey, I wish you would stop. I don't like that, right? If you feel comfortable doing that, that is a good place to start. And if you don't, you can obviously go above the person who's harassing you. You can see if anybody else in your environment is also feeling uncomfortable and gather everyone together for like safety in numbers. I had a case, gosh, this was like 9 years ago at this point. I had a bunch of students come up to me after class and say that they were being sexually harassed by their professor here on campus. And they were all in the same class together and said that the guy like made like really inappropriate comments, really like a lot of innuendos in class, and that they felt uncomfortable. And I encouraged them to go as a group to the dean, because there's some safety and like, it's not just you, right? And so if you feel comfortable, the first step is to ask somebody to stop. But if you don't, you can go to a supervisor, you can go to other people, you can report them, you can file an official complaint. People have to have posted like phone numbers that you can call in the workplace. It's a law, so that you know what your options are. Again, so if you have coworkers that are also feeling the same way, that can go with you. But this is a common one, right? And it can be between anyone, right? And that quid pro quo element is really common, where you see like, if you want that promotion that you've been going for, you have to do this, right? And sometimes it's stated blatantly, and other times it's much more subtle. I have a little video. I don't know why I find it so funny. It's like they made an animation of sexual harassment and they're all dogs. I'm not sure why they're dogs. But it's kind of comical, and it says at the bottom, not for reuse or whatever, but I recorded it anyway. So some of them are obviously way more obvious than others, right? Like that, cat calling, right? And whistling at somebody is way more obvious than like two people having a conversation, right? Or the one guy, I love that it says doggy style. Like, I don't know why that's so funny, right? Because they're all dogs on there, but like she shouldn't have to walk in and see that. Right? That's inappropriate. Like he shouldn't be looking at that at work, right? And that makes her environment uncomfortable, right? Or touching somebody or calling them babe or honey or like whatever. All those things can be examples of a hostile environment, right? And it doesn't always have to be so blatant. It can be very, very subtle, But anything that makes it uncomfortable for you, you're depriving someone of that comfort of their environment. They shouldn't have to deal with that at a place of work, shouldn't have had to be fired for something that like, defending yourself, right? You got a better job, right? Right, but it's still like it shouldn't happen, right? And again, I always like my students always share with me, I always hear that like it's customers, like so many customers like making inappropriate comments. And it gets a little blurrier when it's not like between coworkers or bosses and employees. I remember when I worked at Starbucks, I would have this woman who came in and she would harass me every time. And my manager never did anything to like help me, to the point where I almost filed like charges. Like this woman, like every time would like never leave me alone. She's like way older than me. I was like 19 or 20 at the time. And like, she would try to get me to come out. She was like an exotic dancer. And every time she would come in, she'd be like, do you want to see my moves after work? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Thank you. Like, no, thank you. And like, she'd always ask for like extra caramel. She's like, you could just get in there too. And like, I try to make it like I would try, like, I'm a very easygoing person. And so it took months of this before it like got to me. But eventually I was like, she would come in and I would hide in the back because I didn't want to deal with it. Like it made me so uncomfortable. And my manager thought it was funny and would be like, get out there, you need to help her. And I'm like, I'm not going out there. If you're going to make me go out there, you can fire me. Right. And like, wait till you fire me, wait till what happens next. Right. Yeah. And like, she would never make me go out there, but it was always like, your girlfriend's here. And I'm like, you're only adding to it, you know? And so like, again, this is very common in like food and customer service related industries. And even academic settings, like it shouldn't be, but it sadly is. Any other like stories or comments or anything? Yeah.
Miss Brooks. No, she was this teacher who lived in Birmingham, and she slept with
Yeah.
and his best friend. Wow, but it was like. It wasn't even.
And that's an elementary, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
School class and helping her with like.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is crazy. Like you just don't expect it from.
Well, and in elementary school, no less, right? Yeah. Yeah. But then you're in a double bind here. Not only do you have sexual harassment, but you have like the statutory like element to it as well, because you have a minor and an adult and then a power dynamic, right? That could be really obviously like very traumatic for those kids and very messy, legally as well. Yeah.
In like 2019, I think there was like the whole thing at senior high too, like with the lacrosse coach.
That's right. Yeah.
And yeah, like he's still like in jail and like in like all the trials. Like I know people that were like involved in it.
Yeah.
Like, I've been like following along with it and stuff. And it's literally disgusting because it's like you never like expect that.
No, you don't.
It comes like from the most like unexpected, like I don't know. It's really messed up.
Yeah, and you have somebody who is an adult and then people who are minors, like they should be trusted, right? And you hear stories about that with teachers, with therapists, with coworkers, like sadly, it's not uncommon, but it really should be reacted to very like harshly. Did you have a follow-up thought?
Say that like I feel so horrible because I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like I'm best friends with this daughter. And it is so sad because it has affected that family more than you know. Like they had to move states, they get bullied, and it's like they didn't even know that it was this horrible, Yeah, it's so sad because it just not only affects those so sad.
That person, but everybody around them.
It's like you said, they're at the school thinking that
they're safe.
Environment and nothing will happen.
Yeah, right. Don't even get me started on that. Yeah, sadly, I mean, you would like to think that like, people who are supposed to be in positions of power are supposed to be trustworthy, right? But you hear about it all the time, right? And just like, in these, we're talking here about like a workplace, but like, whether it's a teacher and a student or a therapist and a client, which is a little outside of the realm of what we're talking about here. But whenever there's a dual power dynamic, you are not supposed to abuse that in any way, right? And it can go both ways, right? We tend to hear it about this being something where it's like, you know, a teacher is doing this, but students can obviously do this to teachers as well, right? I had to file a complaint my second semester here. I had a young woman in my class who like made a point to be very like inappropriate toward me. Like every time in class, like she would call me like by my first name and like always come up and find ways to like touch me, and I'd back away and I'd move. And I had to go to tell my dean about it because it made me so uncomfortable. And thankfully, like she moved on after the class, never saw her again. Right. But it was like, this can go both ways too. It can be, you know, happening to someone in a position of power. It can be perpetrated by someone in a position of power. It can go either way. Right. All right. Nice light topics for today, right? Like I know this isn't like the easiest of chapters. We're almost through it. I think what I'm going to do though, I know it's like awkward timing, but I have an activity for this. We're going to listen to a song and like look at some lyrics as it relates to this. And I don't want to like rush through it because we only have 11 minutes. So I think what I'll do is I'll stop here, and then next time we'll talk about intimate partner violence or domestic violence. We'll look at, we're going to listen to a song related to it. As I said, it'll be our last participation exercise, so please try and be here for that. And as I put up here, just a quick reminder for those of you who came in late, make sure that you watch the lecture video that I posted for chapter 16. It is underneath the PowerPoint slides for 16. Okay, so we're not going to be covering that one, but it's a very like light chapter. It's just about common sexual behaviors and interesting, so I hope you watch it. And then we're through with this one. Look at it. Oh, right. So on Wednesday, we'll cover the rest of this and we'll move to 18. Monday, we'll finish up 18. I have a documentary we'll watch about a history of pornography. I think it's kind of interesting. Yeah, for our last class, we'll talk about pornography, right? And then remember the exam is next Wednesday. So start thinking about it, preparing your study guide. Enjoy your few extra minutes today, and I will see you on Wednesday. And the sheet's over here. If anyone didn't sign in, it's over here. Stop.